Hi, welcome. Today we're going to talk about how to start a sketchbook. So if you're someone that needs a few ideas on what kind of book to use or things to draw with, then stay tuned and we'll go through all of those things and a bit more in a moment. First of all, let's talk about what kind of book you can use for your sketchbook. And it might be pretty obvious, but there are some things that can guide your decisions as to what to draw in. And one of the first ones that I'd mention would be that you want a book that is easy to transport, something small like this, or even smaller, or A4 or roughly A4 is a good size as well. And this was I think this was my first proper sketchbook back when I was out east in TAFE in Montana. And it has a beautiful cover with some marbling on it, lovely sort of cream coloured paper, very warm, and so that's a good size to carry around. I wouldn't suggest using something much bigger than that. An A3 sketchbook could be fine as well, but it's just harder to transport. So if you're wanting something that will be easy to transport, to pop in your bag or your laptop carry case, then choose something small. This one here is a hardback, so nice and sturdy, thick cover on it. Some of the other ones will have a thicker backing on them, even though the front might be bendy. But you do want something that gives good support, so that if you're drawing on your lap, so you don't have a table in front of you at the time, then you do have something to lean on, unless you're going to take something extra with you. And it's also nice to choose something that actually looks nice and feels nice to hold. So I think that's why I love this one so much, because it is attractive and it just feels nice to pull it out and to be sketching in that. And this little one here was a gift to me years ago, I think from a student, and I took that away to the UK on holidays and did some sketching in that. And it's, I'm trying to think what you call it, leather punching. So someone has punched the design with special tools into the leather to make it nice and decorative, and it basically looks like a handmade product, which is really nice. Let's see, yeah. So got a soft cream coloured paper, nicely textured as well, so it feels nice, looks nice, and it just gives you that little bit more enticement to get it out and to do some sketching. You might even want to make your own sketchbook if you've got a lot of old scraps of paper, particularly if they're fairly thick, like cartridge paper, even watercolor paper, fold it over and bind it in some way. You can be creative with that. Then there's nothing stopping you from making your own as well. And I will point out that the books that do have the spiral edging on them, that can be handy so that you can lay your book flat rather than one that is bound in the traditional way at the edge, and then you're trying to, sometimes you need to put something else on it to hold the pages down, to stop them turning on you while you're drawing. So a spiral bound one can be good for that as well. So think fairly small, doesn't have to be tiny though. Something that's portable, something that looks nice and feels nice to carry around with you, and possibly something that's easy to stay open as well. Now on to the next question, which is what media can I use in my sketchbook? I mean, really that's up to you. But there are some things where you might not automatically consider using that actually can be quite fun to use in a sketchbook. It might just require a little bit of extra work to protect the pages and so on, to keep things from smudging or getting too wet. You can see in this sketchbook here, I've actually at some point done a chalk pastel drawing, and I would have sprayed that with a spray fixative. And you can also use hairspray if you happen to have a tiny bottle of hairspray in your bag. You can whip that out and spray your work to stop it smudging. Just don't breathe it in. So chalk pastel is one. I mean, obviously grey lead is brilliant. So, easy to transport a grey lead around with you. Some of the other things can take up a bit more space. Again, grey lead can smudge if you've got lots of it on your page. I'll just show you if I can find one where it's transferred a bit. This is not the most extreme version, but you can just see how some of the drawing underneath has actually come off on the page above it. So yeah, using a fixative can help avoid that to a degree, but it's a sketchbook, so you don't necessarily have to stress too much about that. Fine liner is another great one to take with you, and ballpoint pen, any pens, so nice and compact. You can even, as some people do, keep them in your pocket or whatever. So easy to carry around with you and just sketch random things as you're out, or do imaginative drawings. So yeah, fine liner is a great one for that. I'm just going to have a look in another book and see if I can find another one. I should have put little tabs in this book before. Okay, here's one. So here's a watercolor painting that I did at one point of a daffodil in, it looks like an olive oil jar or something to me. But if you have a compact little set of watercolor paints, I did have one floating around on my desk, but anyway, if you have the dried tray of watercolor paints, oops, no, that's not it. Alright. I'm sure that things just move around of their own accord. Anyway, so the watercolor paints that are in the little trays. I do have some metallic ones here since my normal ones have vanished. So these little ones, these are shiny ones, which are actually pretty cool. but the cakes of watercolor paint, they can be good. Winsor & Newton, which is the one I was trying to find before, they do have a nice little compact travel case with a brush that sort of splits in half that you can carry around with you. So watercolor can be good for that. Even watercolor pencils could be good. You might just want to arrange your pages so that you're not going to get the rest of the book wet while you're painting, and you'd probably want to have a fairly thick paper in the sketchbook that you're doing watercolor or watercolor pencils in. You could do ink painting as well. You've got a little bottle of ink, a nib pen that you dip in a bottle of ink would work as well. But again, you want thick paper, and find some way to separate the pages a bit as you're working and let it dry before you close the book. So really, it's up to you what you use in your sketchbook to draw with or to paint with. Oil pastels. I think in this book I have an oil pastel drawing. Yes, there it is. Okay, so I copied a Monet picture at one point with oil pastels, and interestingly, that hasn't left too much of an imprint on the opposite page. So that's stayed on pretty well. I didn't need to spray it with anything either. Yeah, so you could always pop a box of oil pastels in your bag or such, or whatever you carry with you as well. And Copic markers, textures can also be good if you're into those brighter colours and a more graphic kind of look. So really, it's up to you. You just want things, if you're using something that's wet, like watercolor paints, watercolor pencils, even ink, or even Copic markers, you want to make sure that they're things that will dry fairly quickly. Yeah, you wouldn't be doing an oil painting, an oil sketch or something inside a book. It'd be better for that to have a separate board or something, a canvas that you do those on, because once you close the book, it's all going to get squished and slightly ruined at least, and probably stick together. So yeah, I think that's plenty of ideas about what you can use to draw and sketch with. Basically whatever's on hand, whatever you enjoy using. Okay, now for the big question, which is subject matter. So what kinds of things should I be sketching, or what could I sketch? And let's just delve into some of my old sketchbooks and I'll find some examples. And I do have a PowerPoint presentation showing a lot more of my sketches with some music in the background at the end of the video, so you can have a closer look at some of those soon. So I guess one of the most obvious things to sketch is still life, where you've got objects, household objects, everyday objects in front of you. And like if you're sitting at your desk where you have your paints and things, you might just find a, like I could pull up a vase with pencils in it, and I could just try and sketch that or paint that with something. Okay. For some reason I have I don't know why this is in here, but anyway, a Christmassy candle on a plate, so I could just plonk that in front of me and sketch it. And what we're trying to do when we're sketching everyday objects is practice drawing different shapes, seeing how different forms relate to each other, and working on the spatial skills. So looking at things that are made from cylinders, rectangular prisms and so on. Things that have basic shapes are good. Here's my tin that I have my brushes in. Sorry for the noises. Okay, which originally had some Dutch cookies or something in, which were very nice. Okay, so that would be a good shape to draw to start with. But basically whatever's nearby, I will find a few examples. Okay, I think I need to look in a different book for that. There it is. I also need to clean my desk. And every day, by the end of the day, after all my classes and things, it needs a good tidy up. Alright, and you always end up turning to the things that you don't need to find first. Okay, well, anyway. Everyday objects. Fruit is always a good one. Things from the kitchen. It might be a loaf of bread in its packaging. It could be a jar of mayonnaise or a bottle of vinegar or something. A block of cheese. A lettuce, like a whole lettuce or something, or a cabbage. Anything. Here's my toolbox that I stored all my art equipment in at uni. And you can see that I've been trying to add in the perspective lines and things, starting off with the basic rectangular prism shape and then refining it, adding in variations and curves and things like that. So it's all good practice, and one of the key focuses for the sketchbook is simply to practice observing different things to develop your skills. Okay, so a jug and a couple of glasses on a table, practicing my cylinders and ovals or ellipses. A yabby shell. I don't know if you all know what yabbies are, but like a freshwater crayfish kind of thing that we have here in Australia. Some people like to eat them. I don't know if I've ever eaten one. But anyway, there is a yabby shell. So at one point I did have pet yabbies, and one night they were all marching down the lawn out of the pond, and there was great excitement that night. Pets can also be another good thing to, not that they're still very often, but they can be another sort of everyday thing that's in your life that you can sketch. Here is the family cat that we had when I was a kid. I think I was the only one that liked her. But everyone would always come running when she made certain noises in the house. Let's see, just a couple more everyday objects. Oops. Pot of glue, and jar of ink, and so on. And there's a lamp. Okay, so yeah, looking at shapes. With some of them, you're looking at tone as well. You don't always have to completely finish an artwork. Here was a stuffed cane toad that my older sister gave me at one point, and I think it was on a wooden plaque or something. Don't know what happened to it, but it did lose a finger at some point, and I don't know where the finger went. And I also don't know where the cane toad went, but it is no longer with us. Okay. And I think I used some charcoal and some Conte for that one. So Conte is another thing. It's a bit like what you find in the middle of colour pencils, same sort of substance. And you can get little sticks of it, which can be fun to draw with. So still life is the key one. And then obviously for those people that like to focus on drawing people, you can focus on faces and different parts of the anatomy. Hands are very easy things to focus on. Most of us have two of them. One can be holding the pencil, the other one can be resting next to you while you're drawing. And practicing form, practicing your shading, and so on. And you could also pop your shoes up on a stool and draw your feet, draw the shoes. If you don't have any shoes on, draw your bare feet. And I was going to say there goes the village idiot, but I should be kind if you heard that noise. Yeah, yeah, so you might also want to do self-portraits. Some of us don't like looking in the mirror. Some of us don't like recording ourselves for YouTube. But there we are doing it anyway. But if you're happy to look in a mirror, then you've always got your face there as a free model to draw, to practice with. The good thing about a sketchbook is that no one else needs to see it. You're the only one that ever has to see what you put in it. If you don't like what you've drawn, like if it's pretty basic to start with, pretty rough, then there's nothing stopping you, if you want to, from actually just tossing it in the bin if you can't stand to look at it again. But it is nice to be able to look back and see the progress over the years. Some of my earlier work I look back at and think, yeah, it wasn't that good. But over time, I can see the development of things, so that can be good as well. And you could also get people, like friends, family, to pose for you. If they're sitting there watching TV, you could sketch them and ask their permission. Sometimes if you're on public transport and you can do it secretly, there's a guy that I think that was on the train just reading a book, and I just subtly drew him on my way to uni one day when I was probably catching up on my homework. So yes, we had lots of sketching homework. I think I used watercolour pencils there to sketch someone. A drawing of a friend at uni. Couldn't quite finish it, but that's okay. Yeah, so people, animals, another good thing to focus on in your sketchbook. And let's close this one. Another way to use sketchbooks is for imaginative work, and it's not something I do a lot of, but I did find that a while ago I was having a bit of trouble focusing on sermons in church. Some of you might be able to relate to that. And I thought I need something to occupy that part of my brain that just wants to go and do something. And usually it'd be something creative that I was wanting to do. So I thought, well, why don't I bring along a little sketchbook? You often will see little kids around you at church that will be drawing, and it's like, oh, why can't adults do that? If we're listening and paying attention, that's fine. So because I didn't have still life objects in front of me, I didn't have a landscape there. I was in a huge shed building, and I didn't really want to draw the person's head in front of me or the back of their head. So I just do imaginative things, like kind of like a Mr. Tumnus cave kind of drawing there. Quick little sketch of a steam train heading over a bridge. So not what you'd call like hyper imaginative by any means, but things that relate to landscapes and buildings and so on that I love to draw and paint. Just a tree with a castle in the background. Yeah, so it came from my imagination, but still based quite steadily, quite strongly in reality. Some trees and hills, kind of almost looks like clouds. And Christmas bauble. And strange noises from the bird outside. And this one was more imaginative, and that has a spiritual theme to it. And I've tried to do a few drawings of that, but I really need to get one day some people to model it for me properly. I tried, but I took a photo once, but it didn't quite turn out. But the idea is that there's a person who has been set free from the prison that they were in, and they're sitting on the other side of the bars, but there are these arms coming through the bars that are blinding them and holding them back. So they don't actually realise that they're free to go through that archway and to enjoy the landscape beyond. and it was like a metaphor, if that's the right word, for how we can be blinded to the freedom that we have as a Christian, our faith in Christ and the sacrifice he made for us on the cross has actually freed us from the hold that sin had over us. So we're free to embrace the good life that God has set us apart for, but often we feel like we're still chained to sin and that we have no choice but to give in to it. So anyway, that was that one. And just see if there's anything else in here worth showing you. That one was a bit more decorative, more of a pattern kind of thing going on amongst the flowers as well. So yes, imaginative works can be great for doing in a sketchbook as well. You could combine a journal and a sketchbook so that you're putting down your thoughts about life, reflecting on spiritual things perhaps, or just recording the day's events, trying to process thoughts that are troubling you, but you can combine writing down your thoughts with pictures as well. And another good thing to use your sketchbooks for is when you're traveling, to not just take photos of the various places that you visit, but to actually sketch some of them. You could even sketch some of the people that you meet. And there's something more, how do I put it? It's a bit hard to put into words, but something a bit more special about opening a sketchbook and seeing drawings that you've done, maybe with some comments as well, of places that you visited, and you can remember sitting there and drawing it in that location. So here, this is the one that I took to the UK when I was studying at Cape and Ray Bible School, and I visited Buckingham Palace, did a tour through the palace, and here is a sketch that I did of I think it was part of the back of the palace, where the gardens are. And this was the gold angel that was on top of the column in front of Buckingham Palace. I sketched part of an archway in the National Gallery of London. I tried to sketch one of George Stubbs's horse paintings, but I didn't quite get the proportions right. But I had a go. And this one I like. This was in Westminster Abbey, focusing on the beautiful Gothic arches. So yeah, I didn't necessarily finish the drawings completely, but it's just nice to flick through now and see those sketches. Whereas the photos that I took of my time over there, I don't tend to see them very often, or I don't know, it just doesn't quite have that same quality about it. Just find a couple more. That's my fingers start working again. That was part of the building at the Bible College I was at, which was a Gothic revival building. And here is a watercolour painting that I did with my little Winsor & Newton kit. So that was the farm surroundings of the Bible school, which was in Lancashire. Beautiful, even in winter. And I also did some, because we had to learn Bible verses as part of our homework, and so I did a couple of those in here with some decorative bits. So, until now you have asked nothing in my name, ask and you will receive, that your joy may be full. John 16:24. And there was one other one in here. This was the very first one that I had to learn, and I remember walking around through the main property, out through the farmland onto the main road, and it was what we called the loop. Take about 20 minutes, I think, to walk all around. And I'd often walk with a friend or two and we'd recite verses for most of the time and then get on to other things once we felt we'd learnt enough for that day. So a little bird, flowers, some bees. There were lots of lovely fuzzy bumblebees over there. And this is the testimony that God has given us eternal life, and this life is in his Son. He who has the Son has life. He who does not have the Son does not have life. 1 John 5, 11 and 12. So, there it was again. All right, so that can be a nice thing to do as well. You might even just have quotes that you want to put in your sketchbook and then do some illustrations or decorations around those. And just a couple more. So this is the Villa Borghese Gardens in Rome. I went with a friend from Bible school to Rome for a week. Had a lovely time over there. And this drawing I've actually used in my logo. I've got the lamppost there, which features in a few of my artworks. And I can't remember if this was Cambridge, Oxford, or Rome. I think each of those places have one of those kinds of bridges in that you can walk across. And this last one, it wasn't something I saw, but something that's drawn, inspired by Aslan, and also thinking about the Lord Jesus being the Lion of Judah. So a pen sketch of a lion, which I've put on my Zazzle store on some cards and things since then. Okay, so really for subject matter, it's whatever you like. It could be imaginative, could be based on reality. It's good to practice both and not just focus on one thing. It's good to challenge yourself to try different things. Even if it looks terrible, if everything looks wonky, every time you do a new sketch, you will have learnt something, even if it's just small, and you can build upon that the next time. So I hope that gives you a good bunch of ideas of things that you can be drawing or painting in your sketchbook. Last of all, I'd like us to talk about style. And there is a mindset with some people that you should always stick with the same style each time. And one of the reasons is that people who buy artwork, a lot of expensive artwork, when they're looking for artists to support, they want to see that the artist is consistent in their style, or so they say. But as an artist, I would prefer to be free to explore different things. I feel like an artist should always be exploring. There's so many different mediums out there. There's just so many possibilities for creativity, and it doesn't mean that you have to do things that are the opposite end of each other in all your different artworks, but it might just be that sometimes you loosen up, sometimes you try a different medium. Like if you're, usually I'm doing pen drawings that are quite detailed, but you might one day decide, oh, I'd like to do some mosaic work. I'd like to do some collage. Not that you do mosaics in your sketchbook, but the other day in one of my holiday classes with my students, we were doing Christmas beetles, and so we made a collage, and I grabbed some wrapping paper, and this is my Christmas beetle. Very different to what I'm used to doing. I can still tell it's a beetle, but I was trying something different, so that was fun to try a more imaginative thing. And one of my older students likes to challenge me with different kinds of mediums or media, different subject matters and so on. And we were looking at how to create movement in a watercolor painting, and so I was forced to do something a bit different to what I normally do. I'll just grab. So hopefully you can see through the plastic. I'd rather not take it out at the moment. So this is one of my very detailed watercolour paintings of the K Craddock's Antiquarian Bookshop in Collins Street in Melbourne. And you can see that it's all ruled up carefully, very precise, quite realistic. Whereas with this painting that I did with my Year 10 student, we were trying to capture motion and movement, and it's still realistic, but it's more free. It's more like an illustration. Probably reminds you of Beatrix Potter paintings. It certainly does remind me of that. So it's different from what I normally do, and people on Facebook and Instagram commented, "Oh no, that's different to your usual style," and so on, but they really liked it as well. And so it's not, how would I put it? It still resonates with what I'm interested in, with what I appreciate, with what's within me, the way I want to express myself. It still is recognizable and so on, but it is a bit different. So feel free to experiment with different styles and techniques. With another class this week, we've been looking at wet on wet technique with watercolor and wet on dry, trying to create different effects for an ocean view. And so we were practicing different techniques there with the clouds and using the brush in a certain way. And that again is different to what I'm used to doing. But it's good to experiment with different things. You might just find something that you haven't explored before that could actually work really well for you. So you don't necessarily have to think, oh, well, okay, normally I do realistic work, but now I'm going to try cubist or minimalist artwork or something, something very abstract. It might just be that you free yourself up a bit and try some different things. Something that I could maybe challenge myself to do more of is to, instead of just focusing on all the tiny fine details, I could perhaps try to recreate a vintage travel poster kind of look, which I really admire when I see those. So it would be a different style, but it would still resonate with what I appreciate, with what I like. So I'll stop babbling about style, but hopefully you've got the idea that you don't have to stick with the same style all the time. You can vary it, because we're all about experimenting, trying different things, seeing what works for you. And in experimenting, like, you might try something very different, like abstract work, and you might decide, okay, I actually like that, and I enjoy it, I want to do more of it. Or you might decide, no, definitely not for me. And it's interesting, with some of my students recently, we were doing some very quick artworks, and I think everyone in that group agreed, and I agreed myself, that we actually preferred having more time so that we could capture the fine details. And it wasn't a waste of time, us doing the activity, because we all realised that, oh, okay, yeah, we prefer to focus in on greater detail. So, yeah, sometimes pushing yourself to try something different can actually be a good way of giving you a grasp of what it is that you really would like to focus on in your art making. All right, so that's enough for me. We'll go over to the PowerPoint presentation now, and hopefully this has given you some good tips on how to get started, the kinds of things you can draw, what you can use, and so on. I'd love to see any sketchbooks that you create, that you fill, any sketches that you get started. If you have any questions, you can pop them in the comment section, or you can email me through my website, which is www.robertkingdomart.com. And if you like this video, please subscribe to my channel, click the like button, and if you could share it with someone else, that would be much appreciated as well. So I look forward to seeing you in future videos, and happy sketching.